Well, welcome back to the examination technique online workshop number 2. Um, in this workshop, we firstly analyze uh, the some of the examination technique, and then we look at a very important section, section B, which is about the directives. And quite a lot of questions has been asked on this particular part of the syllabus. Now, in the last section, we have talked about the importance of knowing the syllabus. I think one of the uh, points I want to bring out is that your examiner also look at the syllabus when they set the questions. So they have to make sure that questions have not been asked which is outside the syllabus. So by looking at the syllabus, by trying to understand every topics mentioned in the syllabus is very important in your preparations. Now, the second technique is, of course, to know about the examination structure. What does it mean by knowing the examination structure? That means you have to know about the examination format. I think that is quite easy. Most of you do know about the examination format, the paper format. The second one is about the mark criteria. You know how marks will be given, the marking criteria, and what the examiner expect from you, expect to see in your answer. So just give a very brief overview of these topics first before we move to section B. I think that is understood by most of you. For part 1 paper, they're all the same. You're given a paper, you're given 3 hours to answer paper, but you have some reading time. So make good use of the reading time, just like what I've done in the workshop. When you first look at the question, just jot down what you need to answer. Just jot down some outline, some of the point first. I mean, that would be good practice in structuring your answer as well. And there are 2 sections. A is 25 marks. So it consists of 5 short questions. We'll look at some of these short questions before. And again, you can see that even though it's a 5 marks question, I mean, as a rule of thumb, probably you have to think about 5 points or 10 points for each of the questions. See if you can make 5 separate points in your answers. Now, section B is, of course, the most problematic one because usually these are scenario-based problem. Very rarely they may set essay question, but that was very, very rare. So usually that will be given a problem. You have to answer those problem-based questions. So, I mean, section A is compulsory, and in section B, you have to answer 3 out of 4 questions. Actually, what that indicates is that you don't have a lot of choices. I mean, you cannot have a lot of choices. So you only have 1 questions to choose not to answer in section B in here. So what I can say is that probably all parts of the syllabus would be asked. If you do not revise well, then you may be in a very disadvantaged positions. I mean, if you fail to answer one of the subparts of the question, just what you missed 14 marks or 13 marks, then you will place yourself in a very risky positions. So try to write at least something for each of the questions. If you can, if you don't know what to write, then probably you don't select that question. But the number of questions that you can not select is very, very limited. There's only one question that you can not select. So, I mean, this is the examination format. You know this very well. There seems that there's some improving signs in the pass marks. It's usually 40, 30 something to 40%. So I mean, as long as you can discuss something reasonable and sensible, I think marks will be given to you. So what is our target then? Our target is to get 50 marks. So, I mean, in each of the questions, you would target at getting at least 15 marks, right? Or, yeah, 25, half of 25 is 12.5. So if you can get at least 15 to 16 marks for each of the questions, then you will have quite a safe pass. If you aim at 12.5 marks for each question, I mean, then you are still very risky because you don't know whether your points marks will be given in to the points you mentioned in your answer. So I mean, in that case, you have to be very careful. Just to give the examples, I think we've looked at these examples before. So in the paper, all the sections have been asked, there's about section A, B, C, D in here, and then say B, C, D, E. E is the long questions and the part questions. And I think the last time I've also mentioned that they could have mixed questions. So 6A is on section E, and 6B is on other sections. So and then you have different things. So section B is important, and then section C and A and D. So there's a combination of section A and D in this questions. So I mean, there's no fast tracks. If you see how they structure the examination questions, you basically know that there's no fast track. You really need to understand all the sections and prepare all the sections. Make sure that you have a basic understanding first. So I mean, the simple rule is that you should get yourself well revised for your questions. I mean, that is the same for the other paper. So the example given in the earlier paper is a pilot paper, and then in the real paper, it's more or less the same. A, B, C, D will be asked, etc., etc. So we don't go through that. So what I just remind you is that the coverage, they will have a broad coverage of the topics in the examination paper, and you should be aware of that too. Now, the next things, most of the candidates may omit is the marking criteria. In the model, in the marking scheme, they do give some descriptive of the marking, and this is what the examiner or the marker will also look at. Now, in order to get a pass, or if it's a failure, there are two reasons. That the answer may attempt to explain the concept, but then the explanation is not clear. Unclear explanations. Right? So I think that is one of the problem. and what you have answered is not related to the questions, is not related to the scenario. And that is the point I always raise is that when you read those questions, you underline the points and you just mark down next to the question the issues there. And we will look at some of the cases again in today's examples. Well, if you are not well prepared, then of course you don't have any knowledge of the thing. So that's a bit unlucky, you know. This question has been asked on a topic which you are not well prepared. Sorry, then you will not be given any marks. Links between theory and practice. That is to say is a good practice for you to know about the code provisions, for example. We'll regard that as a theory, right? So at least you have to have a good understanding of the different code provision, the CG code in Hong Kong when you answer the question. Make sure that you can apply them in the scenario. Limited analysis, that means there's just no analysis, just simply state the thing. You know? It's just state the points and there's no analysis. And the examiners are not very happy to see that. You know? And for a general statement, not supported with examples. There's no justification for that. That is the problem. I mean, so long as you show a good understanding of the principles, so long as you can give a good and clear explanation, so long as the examiner or the marker understand what you are talking, I think that will be good enough for a simple pass. You know? Simple pass means just over 50 marks. Of course, if this is distinction or the merit, of course, the answer is very clear, written very logically, and the application is correct, and the issues that have been identified is correct, and everything is good. One of the problem is that candidates like to skip lines when they answer the question. There are quite a couple of candidates who skip lines in their answers. I mean, it's not wrong and it's perfectly legitimate to do so, but I don't think that this is a good practice. What you need is to skip lines between paragraphs rather than skip lines between each sentence. You know? I mean, this is not a rule, but this is just a suggestion to you. Now, finally, we take a look at what the examiner expect to see in your answer and what is the problem with most of the questions, most of the answers. One of the thing is that they will look for good command. So demonstrate you understand the thing, you understand the topic, you know. So if it is audit committee, you understand what is the role of audit committee. If it is company secretary, you understand the role of company secretary, etc., etc. You're able to structure yourself logically in the answer. I think the best way to do is to structure according to the question requirement. We'll look at some more examples later on. Deep learning, right? Okay, so I mean, not just something that you can recite, you should be able to apply to the scenario as well. Apply to the context, so you have to discuss in relationship to the problem, not something very general. Good writing ability, of course, you won't be penalized for poor grammar, but you will be, I don't say penalized, but you will be in a disadvantaged position if your handwriting is poor, is illegible. I really heard about uh, examiners telling me that I just don't know what he or she is writing. They're not writing uh, alphabets. They're just writing lines which is difficult to understand. I mean, if the examiner has misread what you have said, then you put yourself in a disadvantaged position, so, because they don't understand what you have written down. That's very important. Time management skill is very commonly said. Uh, at times, I do see that some candidates give a very rush answers for the last questions. That means that they have not allocated time appropriately. So what I want to say is that the examiners are not there to trick you. They're not there to fail you. They're there to make sure that you have the sufficient professional knowledge and skills to enable you to become a professional company secretary or uh, the governance professions. Now, they're here to help you and make sure that you can pass the bar, you can pass the standard. They're not here to fail you. So they are very eager to look at the correct answers. They're not eager to look at your fault or your mistakes. They're there to find out um, answers that they can give you marks, actually. So don't think that they want to fail you. Nobody want to fail you. Next would be the answers. Now, as I've said, in also in part A, um, the, the 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 workshop earlier, some of the candidates did not read the question properly, and the answer is not what the examiner want. And I think I have shown you examples of uh, topic which are very similar, but you can see that um, they're answering things at a different angle. So what you cannot do is to recite your answer, the marking scheme in the past paper, and then put it into the answer in another paper. And that could be quite dangerous because the way they ask the question, basically they won't repeat the question very directly or word to word. They would twist a little bit, even though it's on the same topic. They would twist the question a little bit, and they may ask it at a different angle. So in this case, if you just recite your answer from a past paper, the examiner may think that your answer is irrelevant, and therefore you will not be given marks. Because they don't understand whether you know it or not. They just look at oh, you have said something, but this is totally unrelated. And do you understand the question? Are you answering the question? They may have some query about this, then you will be in a very disadvantaged positions in this case. So the candidates did not understand the requirements of the question. So throughout the examples, I try to explain the requirements of the questions to you as well. Important to have a clear understanding of the question, to analyze the facts. So that's why we have with 1 or 2 minutes, I will let you read the question and see if you can underline the key facts that you need to answer or address in your answer. So this is a very, very common mistake, not reading the questions properly. You know, unable to identify issues. Maybe there's an issue in here, then you do not discuss it. You know. So you're not answering the question. You just write down something from what you have recited. Do not follow hints, do not plan an outline. So this is a practice. I usually give you 1 minute to plan and outline the answers. Why is it 1 minute? Because you can't afford to have a lot of 5 minutes or 10 minutes. You only have 1 minute to think about uh, the structure of your answer. The format is very common in some of the questions. They just ask you to give a briefing notes and that sort of things. And candidates did not give the answer in the form of briefing notes. Well, it's possible that, you know, you would say, oh, it doesn't matter. It's just 1 or 2 marks. I can afford to miss them. I don't need this 1 or 2 marks. So it's up to you to decide. Sometimes 1 or 2 marks is important to get your pass or failure. Right, so that's about all the examination techniques that you have to be aware of. And today we try to look at the questions in section B. And you will see that question B is in fact one of the very important section in your syllabus. Now, firstly, we have a brief overview of what the syllabus in section B. As you can see, section B is a very important topic because a lot of marks have been allocated to these sections. So at least 40 marks have been allocated on average. And then in one case, it could be as high as 50 marks were allocated to this particular section. So I think this is very essential that you know it quite well for this particular section. Now, the first part, the B1 of these sections, is on director's duty and power. I would say that this section is very similar to some of the topics in company law. So for those candidates who have learned company law before, that would be very good because actually there's some overlapping between what you have learned in company law and CG. And actually, you can use what you have learned in company law in here, because in company law, we do have a big sections on director's duties and power. I would like to remind you or the candidates that within these duties of directors, they can't actually distinguish common law and fiduciary duty. So usually the duty to exercise care and skill and diligence is a common law duty. And also it's called care and skill duty. So it is different from the fiduciary duties. Now, for those who have learned company law, they should know about this, but not for those who have no company law background. Then you may need to read a little bit more about the different types of duties. Duties to declare interest. So some of these are statutory duties, duty not to accept benefits, etc., etc. So that's about the duties of directors. Now, the second part is about the board membership. Who are they? What is the functions of the board? What are the methods required by the law? Methods reserved for the board? the composition of the board, reporting on board composition. So these are the things commonly asked in the examination paper. Something relating to the board structure, board membership, who are the ED, who are the CEO, separation of the CEO and the chairman, and the role of executive directors, role of NEDs, etc., etc. So make sure that you prepare this section well. The third part of the syllabus is about the board diversity, and then we'll talk about the nominations committee and the appointment process, and also talk about succession planning. Again, these are very good topics for examination to set a problem about. They will set a problem or a scenario on any of these things quite easily. And then board effectiveness is about board evaluations, board corporate culture, board portal and electronic board papers, that sort of things, providing independent advice for the board committee, performance evaluations. Again, this is a very commonly asked area as well. So, I mean, really, the whole point is that you need to understand the whole thing. Then just show you that sometimes questions are not asked in section A, but there will be a lot of marks in section B. So so basically section B is belongs to a long question type of questions. And it is also interesting to know that this can be combined with the other topics as well. So you can see half of the questions is related to section B. So what is the other half then? The other half will be on either section A, section D, or E, or whatever, So you have to be aware of this. It's very rare that you have the whole question on this section B. It could be only just part of the questions. And even though you learn very well about this this section, but if you're going to combine with the other question which you do not know well, then you will miss a lot of marks as well. So now, just like what we've done in workshop number 1, we will look at each of the questions one by one, and then I will try to explain what you need to address when you answer these questions. What are the key things that you need to be aware of, and how to develop and structure your answer. Now again, I will give you 1 minute to think about what is the approach for this question. So this is a 5-mark question from section A. So this shouldn't be too difficult. All right, so this is a very short question about the duty of the directors. So as you can see in here is a duty to exercise care, skill, and diligence. So basically, this is section uh, 465 of the company ordinance, and this is a statutory duty. This is not a duty from case law, so this is a statutory duty. What is the approach to answering this question? The approach is, of course, you have to understand what is section um, 645 first. If you don't understand section 645, then there's nothing you can write. I think most candidates were able to explain these sections, but there's still some who don't know what this is, and marks cannot be given to them. Now, actually, this duty is called statutory duty because it comes from common law duty. There's a common law duty of care and skill, and later on, Hong Kong legislate this duty, and it become a statutory duty. So since we're not talking about company law, so we don't need to go into details of this type of development. Now, the two things about this duty in here, one is called objective test, the other one is called subjective test. So when you look at the care, skill, and diligence that will be exercised by a reasonable, diligent person with knowledge, skill that particular director has, that would be called subjective test. If you compare the reasonably diligent person with a knowledge skill that may be expected for persons carrying out the functions carried out by the directors in relation to the company, that would be an objective test. So if you're not too familiarized with these two concepts, you are asked to revise these two again. So what is the difference between a subjective test and objective test? You may think that the objective test is the minimum knowledge that you require to perform the function as a director. Now in here, remember, director means all the directors. It could be the chairman, it could be the executive directors, as well as non-executive directors, as well as independent non-executive directors. So you are compare a someone with similar background. So for example, if you're a finance director, you will be compared with the standard of another finance director. Now the second threshold would be the subjective test. You compare with someone with your knowledge or expertise. So supposedly, you know how to do farming, you know how to farm rubber, for example, and you are the director of a rubber company, then you can make use of your expertise in farming rubber trees to your company. You can use this expertise and you're expected to use this skill, care, and diligence to the business of rubber tree planting. And if you look at the common law rules under the case law, there's also one statement which says that the care and skill does not require continuous attentions to the company affair. So you are still having a duty, you are still exercising your duty of care and skill if you come to the office once or twice a year. There's no need to go to the office every day. You can delegate your power to someone else. So basically, this is about section 465. So if you understand section 465, that's very good. But if you don't, then you probably will miss this 5 marks in your answer. Let's take a look at another example, which is quite, I would say, which is not a very popular questions. So it's about the indemnity or the insurance cover. If you look at the syllabus, they do appear in your syllabus. They say D&O insurance. That means directors and officers insurance. So you have to understand a little bit about this. And this again, it's a 5 marks question. So you can see that question can be asked about here, question can be asked somewhere in here. So all of the questions could be asked. Now, how would you structure your answer? Again, give you 1 minute to think about this. I think this is a pretty straightforward questions. Just like the earlier question, if you understand them, if you have learned about topic, just like what we've seen, the care skill and diligent example, if you know about section 465, then you know the answer. If you don't, then you will have 0 marks. So it's very similar because that is a similar requirement under the company ordinance. You have to explain that company can provide insurance cover to protect liability. So that is possible. It's illegal for a company to provide insurance cover. So this is a very straightforward answer. Is that whether can do so? Yes, the answer is that yes, the company can provide such insurance cover for the company. So the question is what they cannot provide. The company can provide insurance cover, but the company cannot provide the exemption of liability. So the company cannot to exempt the directors from liability. If the director is liable, the company cannot exempt them from liability. So if you have any article in the companies or in your contract that helps to exempt or indemnify a director from the negligent liability, default, breach of duty, or breach of trust in that case. So these attempts to exempt the directors from liability is void. So against this background, then you will see that under company ordinance, a company can provide insurance cover or indemnity cover for the directors. So I think you can see the difference. The company cannot exempt the directors from liability, but what the company can do is to provide insurance cover for directors. But of course, there are also some restrictions. So they cannot provide indemnity cover against payment of criminal penalty. And then if the director is convicted, the company cannot indemnify directors with liable in criminal proceedings, and the director is eventually convicted. So we can go on with a lot of these examples of under what circumstances could a company indemnify a director or not indemnify a director. So sometimes it's called a D&O insurance, sorry. What is it? Which is the directors and liability insurance. Directors and officers insurance, the D&O. So this is possible to buy insurance for them, but it's not possible to provide direct exemption of liability. We have very similar provisions in the company ordinance, in the model articles as well. And then also, we can see similar things in the code provisions, where the CG code provides that the Hong Kong listed company should arrange appropriate cover in respect of any legal actions of the directors. So you can see that no, this is a quite simple and straightforward question, but it doesn't come up easily, frequently, and therefore some students who are not well prepared will be caught by this type of question. So that's why it's very important, as I've explained, that you should at least give short explanation on each of these things, each of the topics that's mentioned in the syllabus. The next area in section B is about the role of the board. So one of the commonly asked questions will be things like matters reserved for the board of directors. Now in here, you are asked about the matters that are reserved for the board with reference to the CG code. So you must mention CG code in the answer, and these three functions that the board can perform through the committees, but it still has the final say. So again, try to give you 1 minute and think about how to answer these questions, what you will write down in terms of the functions. So I think we can mention three of those functions that the board has the final say. For example, the appointment of the members to the board of directors. So even though it has been nominated or recommended by the nomination committee, the final decisions of appointment is by the board. Financial statement is another example. Even though the audit committee recommends, uh, it's the board which finally approve the account or any financial statement. And also, um, this is the same for the proposing of the appointment of auditors. Yeah. So probably you can guess that you're required to list three functions. Then the three functions, if you state very correctly, then it will be 3 marks for three functions. But how about explain the purpose of matter reserved by the board? Well, remember that in here, it is the purpose. They ask you what is the purpose of the board, and you have to give reference to the CG code. So what is the purpose, and what does the CG code say? So that's why I've told you that learning the CG code is the basic thing. So if a question like this has been set out, then you can immediately show the marker or examiner that under CG code, the issuer should have a formal schedule of matters reserved by the board for their approval. So you have to mention about the CG code, and you can also explain the purpose. What is the purpose of matter reserved? Of course, it's very clear about the division of work, who is responsible to whom, and the executive team is also know about these things, how much duties they have, and how much the duties have been dedicated to them. But it's also possible that it can be very detailed. And if that's the case, the company secretary will play a major role to ensure that the schedule is observed. So it's a bit simple and easy question on a particular topic on B2. Now, let's take a look at another one, which is the disclosure of the board composition. So you can see in here, again, the wording is actually the same as that in the exam, in the syllabus. It says that reporting on board compositions and balance between exempt and non-exemptive. So, again, this is a long question. And then you will have 14 marks on this. So that's quite a lot. So how would you answer these questions? Again, I will give you 1 minute to think about what is your approach. Okay, for this question, um, you have to understand the reporting on board compositions, and that's a requirement under the company ordinance, um, that you need to disclose um, the directorship duty in the director's report. Um, it's also uh, in the D2 of the listing rule require listed company to include a corporate governance report prepared uh, by the board of directors in their annual report and the summary financial reports. So these are the things that are required uh, by the um, that are required um, by the listing rules as well as the company ordinance. Now, the corporate governance report must contain information, and that's a mandatory disclosure requirement. So for the mandatory disclosure requirement, you need to disclose details of the directors who serve on the board in the financial year. Now, in here, you have to uh, understand the mandatory requirement in, and as I've said, in the CG code, um, most of them will only focus on those comply or explain principles, but they may ignore the mandatory requirement part. So part one of the CG code um, say a lot of things about the what to be included in the annual reports. So that will, for example, you have to include compositions of the board, number of board meetings, attendance by the directors, uh, the contributions, details of any non-compliance, um, uh, reasons why certain people are independent, etc., etc. So, unless you know this topic very well, otherwise you may not be able to answer this the detailed requirement, what you should include in the annual report. So that's just the requirement under the CC code. What you need to disclose about the board compositions, any problem with the board compositions. So that related to gender things. Of course, that's not for this particular company. I didn't show you the facts in here, but the board do not have sufficient gender diversity, and they they have to um, disclose a policy on the board diversity and methods relating to gender diversity in the annual report also. And another thing that you need to report is that they have to appoint company secretary. So again, we have in the scenario there's a dual role process. One is belongs to the in-house lawyer, and another role is the company secretary. So again, you can discuss this as well. So I mean, uh, apart from the disclosure, you have to disclose the details of the composition. So you have to point out what are the problems in the compositions of this type of company. Now, this is interesting question. Um, you are asked to prepare a briefing note. So as I give you again 1 minute and think about how to approach this question. What are the different sections or different paragraphs that you need to write for these questions? Now, as I've said earlier, if your answer according to the requirement and your answer is set out in the form of briefing note, you may be given 1 mark for that. All right. You may say, okay, it's just 1 mark. I don't care about this. Then you can write in whatever format you like. But sometimes 1 mark is very important in some cases. All right. So, and in here again, you can see the question actually is divided into several parts, and you just follow this pattern and answer according to this requirement. That will be good enough. So, what is the role of the board committee? And you can see again this phrase reference to the CG code always come up in the examinations. You know, I use a different color for that. Okay, so I mean it's come up quite a lot of time. Reference to CG code in here. This is not mentioned in here. I think somewhere there, again, reference to CG code. Okay, you can see in here. I think this is reference to the company orders, but not the CG code. So I mean, when you revise the thing, you need to see the important thing. Sometimes it just asks you with reference to the CG code again. Right. Okay. So if you can quote the exact code provisions, marks will be given for that. So what is the role of the nomination committee? Probably you know that they're responsible for reviewing the size, structure, compositions of the board annually and make recommendations on any change. The nomination committee also needs to identify individuals who are suitably qualified to become a member of the board. So they are the people in the teams. Then you can see that the question also asks you about the process for the appointment to the board. Again, this very commonly asked questions, how to appoint a director. I mean, that is very straightforward actually for this type of questions. This is actually how to appoint a member to the board. and answers you can, I mean, students can write down good answers for this type of questions because they should know about this. And um, even though you don't know about the details, as long as you mention something sensible, marks will be given. So firstly, you have to understand that the process of appointment depends on objective criteria. And if you fulfill those criteria, then probably you will get appointment. Usually, the company secretary will produce a skill matrix and a diversity. And you can check which area is lacking from this particular matrix. So if we show to the board what's the particular matrix, what particular skills are missing on the board, and the recruitment for the directors should also take into consideration of gender, diversity, and all the other things. What is the role of the nomination committee in the appointment? So they should agree the process uh, that 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 can identify suitable candidates. So they can use things like search engine, or nowadays they use those websites to search for the appropriate candidates, and they can make advertisement, and they can have sort of budget for that. You should hire a recruitment agency for that. That's also important. The appointment should be a formal process. It should be transparent, and you could look at the evaluation, board evaluation, to look at the skills as required after the evaluations. The process of appointment also related to time commitment. Make sure that the new appointees have sufficient time. Due diligence, especially in relations to independence of independent directors, but they can use reliable social engine to do the checking for you. So after the nomination committee has been through the selection process, they can recommend the candidate to the board about a new appointment, and the appointment may be approved by the board resolutions. So the nomination committee will then send out the appointment letters. And the expected time commitment from the candidates. You have to tell them what they expect, etc., etc. And these things have to be disclosed to the report. And then for new candidates, they need to have an induction for the new appointment. And then finally, you can talk about what's the recommendations on the nomination committee's recommendation, how the board, how the whole process is related to this particular company. So we have not given the facts in here, but you can see that the questionnaire actually asks you to deal with the problems in the company, in that particular company. So in that case, you really need to look more specifically at the um, at the requirement. Now, apart from that, we also have some examples of the appointment of a chair and the um, factors that should be considered in the appointment of a chair. Again, just give you 1 minute. Now let's take a look at these questions. So the question in here is, sorry, it's just the other way around. So again, we can see the provision of CG code. This phrase always come up in the examination, and then you will probably know that this is something related to the you have to code the CG code. Analyze the process that this company should follow in the appointment of the new directors, and what factors should be considered when selecting new chairman. So actually, they have classified or divide the answers for you. What is the process that they should follow, and what are the factors they should consider when selecting new directors, new chairs to the board. So let's take a look at some of the important points that you should discuss. Now, in uh, the facts and the questions, um, again, this is about the nominations committee, so it's quite similar to the one we've seen before. And then following the process of selection and appointment of the directors. So what is the reference in here? So let's take a look at this question. And you can see that this company is listed on the main board. So it's a listed company. As the stock exchange of Hong Kong. So this is the business of the company is to manufacture cardboards, etc. And there are a lot of people. A lot of people for working in this company. So you have to think about what's the CG code. How can you demonstrate good understanding of this one? And then there are 7 directors altogether. And there's a non-executive chairman, 3 INED, and the NEDs in here. So the chairman is going to retire soon. So the chairman in here informed the board that she will be resigning. So it's about succession planning. And this Brian Poon said that he would like to put forward for the appointment as a chair in next year. So this is the most senior IED want to be the chair of the um, committee. So he has been the board for 6 years, and Susan is chair of the nomination committee. So there's a very long questions, a lot of marks on here, given on the appointment of the new chair. So we have one in here, who is uh, the most senior INED. Is he a good candidate? How would you structure your answers in this case? So the first part is with reference to the CG code. So what you need to talk about is under CG code, what are the uh, roles of the nomination committee? Well, they should identify suitable persons and make recommendations. So what is the role of the nomination committee? It's about leading the process for the recruitment of the new directors. And currently, the chair of the board uh, may be involved in the appointment of her successors. Now, the the problem is that who sits in the nomination committee? Now, in here, it doesn't mention very clearly, but as an INED, it's possible that Brian may be involved in the recruitment process because he is the most senior INED, and he put himself as a candidate for the appointment. So he may, in that case, he may not be involved, and he should not be involved in the recruitment process. Of course, he could be a good candidate, but the the problem is not good if he's involved in selecting himself as a candidate for appointment. So I mean, it may be good that he did not uh, vote on any matters in relation to the recruitment. He could stay on the committee in relation to other matters, but he could not vote. Right? So if we do not select Brian Poon, then we may need to search for another one, um, and there's a period. So there's a 6 month. We'll still have 6 months before Susan leaves the company. So we still have some time to select for the appropriate candidates. Um, there's one more point about this is the most senior member in here. He has been with the company for um, quite a number of years. Can he still be uh, a independent entity anymore? So this can raise some discussion on whether he's still uh, qualified as an independent director or not. And then, as we have seen in the nomination committee, they should have the uh, skill matrix, make sure that the skill matrix can map the people around, etc., etc. And then you have the search process. So in that case, it's very similar to the earlier questions about the time, whether you should have sufficient time to be devoted to the role. So what's a time commitment? So you think about the uh, the candidates other time commitment as well. So that's quite a lot to discuss for this type of questions. Because it's appointment, then you can discuss a lot of other things related to the appointment. Right. Next, we look at another typical example, which is about evaluations. I would say that uh, this is an area not many candidates are familiarized with. You know. Especially, he says in here, draw the experience and practice from other things. So it's about board evaluations, and you're going to think about the evaluations in UK company. I mean, uh, for this type of questions, um, it's better if you could understand the FRC guideline on the board evaluations. Uh, in this connection, I also remind you that there has been an issue of a new HKCGI guide on board evaluations. They also give you a new 2024 April version of the HKCGI guide on board evaluations. So board evaluations, is a question I think not many candidates are familiarized with. So my advice is that you should take a look at the FRC guideline on the board evaluation, because in here it asks you directly to give reference to the practice in other jurisdictions. So it's not just Hong Kong. You can also discuss the other jurisdictions as well. So I don't go through the board evaluations in detail. Uh, I mean, if you just read the code provisions as well as the FRC guideline, there are quite a lot of good practice for board evaluations, and therefore I recommend you to take a look at those guidelines directly. So in short, the evaluations must be tailor-made to the customer need, and uh, that's about the board evaluations. And in connection with the report evaluations, it's very frequently asked about external and internal evaluation. So I think you need to prepare for that. What's the advantage uh, of external evaluation, and what's the advantage of internal evaluations? I mean, if there's a conflict, between members within the board, maybe external evaluations may be a good suggestions than internal evaluations, because for internal evaluations, it's just telling a member within your company. But if it is external evaluations, then I think people can disclose more to third parties, that's the sort of things that you can discuss as well. So, so you need to discuss the internal and the external evaluations. Um, I mean, I won't go through the detailed answers with you for this question, but I think um, it's it's quite important for you to know about the FLC guidelines. No? I think in your study guide mentioned about the FLC guideline. So the most important part in the FLC guideline is how to conduct a board evaluation, which is effective board evaluations. All right. But the last question for section B is a very simple question on board portal and how to distribute board papers. You can see in here that this is not a frequently asked question, but you can also use your common sense to answer this sort of thing. So why you don't have a paper thing, why you rely on the board portal, I think. So even though you have not uh, revised this topic, you can still um, say something sensible on this. For example, electronic board portals give a good communications among the board members. We distribute the board paper to store the board paper so we can read it anytime. For if you have missed out one of the meetings, you can take a look at those meetings, with the notes on the meetings. A portal can also be secure, so there's no. I mean, I wouldn't say no, but you can reduce your cybersecurity harm. Again, there's another concern, and they can um, have different advantages, like storage advantages, because the things are stored in the cloud. Then supposedly it's more difficult for unauthorized access, to the materials. And so I think another point that I think most people can make is that being uh, electronic is better than the traditional hard copy type, and that we reduce the waste and doing things which are environmental and things like that. Um, I mean, this is not a very difficult questions on the electric model. And again, you can see that since it is uh, in the syllabus, then you have to be aware that any possibility can come out. Just like this is not a very frequently asked question, but it does appear in your syllabus, and therefore is legitimate for your examiner to set a question on this. Now, the last one for this workshop would be something related to the induction process. I mean, that's not difficult. Again, it's a 5-mark short questions. As long as you mention something sensible, uh, marks will be given. Now, one thing in here is that There are several things you need to look at for this questions. And that is firstly is a new one. I'll just mention new one. The other question is that he is a non. The non-NED. So is there any difference between the appointment of NED and the non-NED? Is there any difference between the appointment of the NED when you design your induction program? Would there be any difference between the induction program for an NED and a non-NED in here? Now, in here, the question asks you the issues to be considered. Then the focus should be to consider what is the issue that you need to consider. What's the aim of the induction program? So the aim of the induction program is simply to enable the directors to know more about your company, to understand the company more, so as they can fulfill their role as the directors. And again, you need to have a tailor-made inductions. So in the code provisions, we emphasize on this tailor-made. You don't have one size that fits all, because not all the INED or the non-exempt directors have the same background. So it's better if it's tailor-made to the individual directors. So, for example, if he is has not been a director of a listed company before, then they will join. They will need more guidance if they have no experience as a director of a listed company. If they have some such an experience, maybe you can have more less inductions. And whether you're in the same business or not, if you're not from the same business, then you may need more inductions or giving more information. So what you need to do is to consult the non-exempt directors. You can consult them and see what they want, so that you can assess the need and knowledge of these particular directors. One common sense answer would be that you don't want to overload the NED by having an induction program which runs for 5 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours. You could spread out the time. You don't want to overload the NED, because if they are overloaded, they can't take in any of the things in the induction program. I think it's easier for candidates to mention also about the site visits or meeting with the key people. So I mean, if they're new to the company, you may need to introduce him to the rest of the board, as well as the other senior management people. So I think for this type of questions, as long as you come up with some sensible answer, that would be fine, and it's not that difficult at all. But the point is about new and new non-executive directors. So you may need to think about what are the specific needs of this non-executive directors. Okay, I think that's all for this section B. So we'll continue with section workshop number 3, and I will go through with you some examples of the rest of the section in the syllabus, as well as some examination technique. Thank you very much.